SnapTech IT is the expert go-to resource for all things CMMC, education, certification, preparation, and ongoing managed IT. Manage, secure, grow. Check it out at snaptechit.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of 123 CMMC. My name is Dana Mantilia, and I will be your host today. And our guest, who we have seen before, is back again, Karl Bickmore with SnapTech IT. Hello, Karl. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you, Dana?
Good. I'm excited to talk about our topic today because it's one that no one ever really wants to think about, but we really do need to think about. So today we're going to talk about how ready are you for a cyber incident? Okay. So to kick this off here, our first question is going to be, do your people have a plan on how to respond?
You know, it's so funny. The NIST organization that kind of started off this process that has led us to CMMC starts with 5 original categories, you know, identify, protect, and detect. And so many people can get their head around that. Identify and protect a lot. People are starting to understand threat detection. But so many people never get to that respond and recover phrase of it, which is, how are you going to handle this when it happens and how did it go? And the reality of it is that if you don't have a plan, one, you're not compliant with the CMMC regulations because incident response planning is part of the documents that you should have. But really, as an organization, you should be interested in this anyway, because the decisions you make when people are under stress need to be thought out in advance. If you don't do that, then what you're going to find is that people will be making stressful, tired decisions, and they will not be the optimal ones. I mean, we've seen a few messes happen out there when we've been called in to help with incident response. And there's a big difference between one that runs against plan and one that's just being made up on the spot. It's a really big difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that. And the other thing is have they tested it? So they put a plan in place. Does everybody know about it? Have they tested it? So share with us a little bit about testing the plan.
Well, you can test it 2 ways. One, by actually having an instance, not the best way to test because, you're going to make the mistakes on an actual instance and be playing with your company's own people and your own money, right? Or you can actually test it proactively by doing tabletop exercises. Tabletops, you create scenarios that are very realistic. You maybe get somebody that is familiar with incidents to give you kind of some scenarios to go through. But if you can sit there and test the plan before you actually have an instance, it's amazing how much more helpful it is during an actual incident. And so even though some people may have this document sitting somewhere on their file server that says it's an incident response, it doesn't mean much if people don't know it, understand it, and use it. And you typically can't get that going until you do some type of tabletop exercise to simulate an actual incident.
Mm-hmm. And I think the tabletops are a good idea because I always say when we were kids, we knew exactly what to do with the fire drill. A couple days into school, first thing we're doing is we're doing a fire drill. Everybody knew exactly what to do and where to go. And if we could ever treat this like that, and hopefully there never is a fire, and you think about, there weren't many fires when we were kids at school, but everybody knows how to do a fire drill. So there's a lot of cyber attacks that are happening, and most people don't know what to do in that situation.
Yeah, it's so true. It's a really good point. It's about building that muscle memory of like, oh, I don't just react. Maybe we stop and communicate first, or maybe we make sure that we're following the procedure. I can't tell you how many times we've seen the on-site IT resource or another outsourced provider in an organization that they just start doing stuff based on and it's with good intentions, but sometimes they're causing more harm than good. I mean, there's been some real doozies out there. You got to remember, people are now at a spot where the entire company is now looking at them. Everybody's totally freaked out. There's probably going to be some ransomware demand happening with really big numbers, and it's just an unpleasant thing. And if you don't have some of the fallback to take you through the steps correctly, you're highly likely to make a mistake. That could have really big consequences to your organization's longevity.
Yeah, and it's obviously a very stressful time too. So let's hear about some experiences that you have had.
Oh, well, so I love to say that we've always been great at incident response, but it's definitely something in my organization that as we've gone through it, we've become better at. I will tell you those, something that comes up all the time are business email compromises. That's, the vast majority of successful attacking is happening there. So I can think about, even a relatively recent incident where we had a financial services client that had a business email compromise. And it was noticed initially by the end user, not by us, which was not fun. I could tell you that the initial process was somebody had gotten access to this person's mailbox from a foreign company, which was interesting because we had things like geocode filtering on the email settings, but just about any setting can be broken. This account also had multi-factor authentication turned on, but somehow they'd gotten in and actually disabled the multi-factor. And well, first they changed the phone numbers to the phone numbers for a text for the multi-factor to them so that they could authenticate to the account and they received the text to complete the login with the multi-factor. And so, we've talked a lot about how multi-factor is something that needs to be on, and it's absolutely true. But just don't think that that means you now can't get a compromise and you can just do whatever you want and not have an incident response, not have a plan. Some people talk about the term cyber resilient versus cyber defense. I guess the concept is you should really kind of think, I always am vulnerable. I can have an attack, and I need to be prepared. Just how can I increase my resilience, right? And multi-factor authentication is great for resilience. But nonetheless, in that experience, look, we found an account that we don't see this very often. It had a lot of good security settings on and multi-factor authentication on, and still yet there was a compromise. Now, fortunately, we did have some logging things in place, so we were able to quickly ascertain how far and wide they got. And we immediately jumped into our incident response plan on this one, which we convene a specific group of people in our organization to begin the communication process and with the customer. And we immediately contact the cyber insurance folks and the legal resource that the customer had set aside to make sure that they're alert and aware. And we begin looking at containment. We begin looking at the process of figuring out the forensic side of this, all in kind of order. And what typically happens with a business email compromise is you don't actually have an interruption beyond the affected mailboxes or 2 or 3 or whatever it may be. So the rest of the folks are usually cruising along okay, but you really have to be careful to figure out how the folks came in and how you can shore that up and get them out. This particular customer did not have a threat detection utility and a SIM tool hooked up to their email at their cloud provider. And because of that, we probably lost some visibility and might have been able to catch this sooner. And we're very hopeful that now that they're, we've gotten the other side of it, they're ready to think about some of these additional detection things, because maybe we could have stopped it sooner. But ultimately, we were able to fairly quickly respond, contain, get the right people involved. We crafted a message out to their customers. We determined that in this particular scenario, because of the data that was, or more importantly, was not in the email, that this did not represent a PII or a personal financial information breach. And so it wasn't as serious as it could have been. But nonetheless, the process worked fairly well, But I can tell you, a ransomware event, we were involved. This was not one of our customers. It was actually a competitor of ours in the Midwest, a good-sized competitor, about 9,000 computers under management. They had a ransomware attack on their system. This is very similar to how the Kaseya attack went down recently and the SolarWinds attack, is that the IT tool used to manage all these customers was the thing that they got access to. And so we actually got called in by the insurance company to help on this one, because we have a couple of people on our staff that are very good with this particular IT tool. And the problem was their incident response plan was not in good shape. And so their guy that was managing this automation tool, this remote managing tool like a Kaseya or a SolarWinds tool, had kind of been up in the range of 24 hours straight and was starting to really make bad decisions. And was unable to really get this thing contained or identified. And I can tell you, when it was all said and done, it was determined that there was an RDP port, a remote desktop port, open to that server. That's how the vulnerability happened. But nonetheless, the process of going through this By the end of the first day we got involved, their guy just up and quit. He just left them. He's like, I'm not coming back. And look, and I get it. You know, it's like it's a high pressure situation. They didn't have a game plan. They didn't have the expertise they needed. They had never really planned for an outage of this, and it hit them and all their customers simultaneously. And so we've been working with them. We're trying to get a hold of it. And, you know, the scary thing about this is, you know, not only did the attackers get in long enough to get to spread to every client, but they also had figured out the backup environment to the clients and had deleted all backups as they went, which meant that the recovery side of this was very poor. And, you know, that's the kind of thing that a tabletop or a test of your incident response might uncover. It's like, oh man, the attackers got in and issued ransomware and they deleted our backups. Maybe we want to do something different with our backups. We just exposed that, right? So we saw it in real life. The backups were deleted, the ransomware happened, and their guy who's going to try to contain and control this worked himself out and quit. You know, he's done. Meanwhile, they don't know what they're going to do, and so they begin negotiating to actually pay the ransom, which is unfortunate, but it was where they were. And so with the insurance company and help and us trying to work on the system side, they ended up paying that ransom. And then it really became incumbent upon us to help them decrypt everything out to 9,000 machines quickly. It was at least a week and a half before they really had everybody back and functioning in a good way. I mean, that's an eternity in the IT world, I would say. And you know, the thing about it is it was just a great example of not having a plan, not understanding major weaknesses, not having the audit and testing of their services to make sure that they didn't have a weakness like an RDP port open. And the guy became so stressed and they're so disorganized that they were doing really poor decisions and basically got themselves without a resource to even help internally. Very costly to recover, very heavy reputation hit for them. And, you know, for our perspective, you know, we can't say that we totally own that because it wasn't our client that actually got hit, but we came in and helped. And we just saw a great example of people just doing whatever they could think of, working themselves raw, no communication plan with the customers, no communication. They had not called anybody but their insurance company. And they were just working through it the hard way and making every mistake you could see, you know. So, I mean, those are just two examples. I feel like at some level we get involved in incidents all the time, but fortunately, knock on wood, not as much with our managed clients. But, you know, we can, and we've had, like, you know, a business email compromise here and there. And we should be treating it as though we are going to at any point in time. That's the way we should behave. That's the way we should think. That way we can do a better job if and when it does occur.
Well, and I think, you know, when these things do happen, everybody wants to turn to the IT department or the MSP and say, well, what are you going to do about this? And they don't understand. If we rewind a little bit, like you just mentioned, a communication plan, you could establish a communication plan right now before anything has happened so that everybody knows what you should and should not be sharing and who's going to be the point person to be in charge of deciding what we're communicating to either the clients or to the media, depending upon the size of the company. And if that's not decided beforehand, it's like the Wild West. Who's on social media telling their friends? Who's calling their parents? Who's calling a client saying, I don't know what's going on. I think we're getting hacked down here. You know, and that's bad. That's damage that you could definitely avoid.
Well, we've seen where a customer drives down to the MSP and starts demanding to enter their facility and demanding they work on their things right now. And there's a lot of crazy things that go down when this happens. And yeah, people will start talking to a customer because one called. But you really do need to be careful and make sure the messaging is together. And that's exactly right. For us, you know, it's simple things like we happen to use Microsoft Teams for internal communication. So we immediately open a Teams chat dedicated to the incident response. We name the incident response, but we name it a name that's a city name, not the company name, not ransomware breach. We avoid calling it things we don't know it is or isn't. And then we know exactly from our policy who should be in that communication. And it's declared who is the person that communicates with customers, who communicates with vendors, and who would communicate with others if there was needed media or whatever that may be. And that's communication is actually probably the number one thing. In fact, if I give anybody a tip on something to do in your incident response, whenever a major incident happens, just assume you should do an hourly communication check-in with all constituents, just every hour until resolved. that makes an enormous difference in the confidence that even if you have no updates, give up, we have a no updates at this time message. It's amazing how much that helps people understand you're still working on it, you're still trying to help, you're still doing the things you need to do. And then also I think it's important to be honest, you know, and to not give rosy pictures when they don't exist, you know. So anyway, just a couple of war stories there.
No, I think those are great. And, you know, people do want to stick their head in the sand and pretend that this did not happen when it does happen. So that's a good point. But I like what you had said about the tabletop exercise and then finding out that they were able to go in there. They would have maybe found out that they could get their backups. You know what I mean? So maybe if they had done a tabletop like you had said. So speaking of tabletop exercises, let's talk about the first one that you did at SnapTech IT.
Well, my business partner, Sean Brown, he's our CISO of our organization, and he had been working with some friends of ours and created a fun scenario. He created a PowerPoint deck and kind of said, okay, this just happened, this call made, and what do you do? And so we got different people in the room, literally, you know, around a table with the PowerPoint slide up and gave them the scenario. And it was fun at one level to watch our people, but it was also kind of disheartening because you know, the reality of it is until you practice it, people don't even think about the policy. They just start troubleshooting. They start working tickets. They start doing what they normally do. And so even at the point in time that this went from just like, hey, my email won't work. I can't even remember what the scenario was on our first one, but it was probably out to a ransomware scenario. But the even as soon as the tech got to a point in the troubleshooting call, the fictional one, with the end user that they figured it was probably a big serious security event, he never thought, hey, stop, you know, go communicate, get the team together. Where is the incident response policy? What is the next step I need to take? So that was the first number one really kind of sad thing is the engineers involved didn't once think we should look at the incident response policy and make sure we're following procedure. And that was pretty eye-opening for us. As much as we talk about cybersecurity and how to defend and what to do, even in that moment, even a fictional tabletop, our people still didn't think fundamentally basic, go to the procedure. Well, I could say that since we started doing tabletops, we don't have that issue anymore, but you still have all sorts of things that gets uncovered when we run them. Like, oh, did we think that we should involve a legal resource? Have we called insurance yet? Do we know where the number is to call? Mm-hmm. Do we understand what we should or shouldn't say to them? You know, so forth, so on. It's a good exercise. You know, once a year is probably a really great number to start with, maybe even do it more often. I can tell you as an IT provider, we think more often because we're involved. By nature of the business, we will be involved in these, and we need to be on point when they happen. So,
you know, that's a good point too about who do we call and what's the phone number, because it sounds silly, but, you know, if somebody's got that stored on their computer, let's say the office manager or whoever, you know, has got that, and you can't get access to that, then everybody's saying, well, what's that guy's name? Okay, well, let me see if I can find him on the internet or something like that. You're trying to figure this out like that, and that's kind of a shame. But, you know,
well, yeah, here's a good question. How many people in your organization even know who your cybersecurity insurance is from, right? Probably 2, maybe 3. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have that there in handy and documented, they'll never follow it. They'll never make that call. They can't. You know.
So that's a good point. And the tabletop exercises, listen, it's like everything. If you're an athlete and you practice, you're going to get better. If you're a musician and you practice, you're going to get better. And this is the same thing. And then, like you said, that muscle memory was we have to create like, okay, that's right. I've done this before. This is what we did that time. And I think that will help everybody. And actually, we just have to make sure they actually start putting something together. That's what it is. Get the ball rolling, right?
Have a plan. Test the plan. It's that simple. Right. And ideally don't test it on real instances. Right.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Hopefully. All right. Well, this was really, I like this one a lot. This was good. Hopefully people found this to be helpful. And Karl, look forward to the next one that we're going to do. And thank you, everybody, for listening in. And we hope that you picked up a few tips and you go get your incident response plan put together. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
SnapTech IT is the expert go-to resource for all things CMMC. Education, certification, preparation, and ongoing managed IT. Manage, secure, grow. Check it out at snaptechit.com.